Your phone is face down on the floor beside a photo you weren't looking for. You found it by accident. For about 4 minutes, you are back. Actually back, not remembering it. Your shoulders drop. Something in your face does a thing it hasn't done in months. Then it's gone, faster than it arrived. By the end of this, you will have 6 things people do while waiting for that feeling to stay, ranked worst to first, by what each one actually costs, not by how it feels. So why does the feeling always leave faster than it comes? Hold that question. It matters more than it sounds like it does. The withheld piece is this. The worst item on this list is never the one that looks the most desperate. It's the quietest one. Almost nobody would flag it as a problem, including you, until it gets named later in this video. You already know 3 ways people try to get the old self back. Wait it out. Force the old routine until it clicks. Ask what that version of you would have done, and do that instead. You've tried at least one this month. They're the first 3 rungs, in that order, for a reason that lands by the 3rd chapter. What you don't have yet is the argument that explains the order. It's 2,500 years old. And the part that matters is a sentence almost nobody who quotes it has actually read. You know the popular version already. You cannot step into the same river twice. People say it about breakups, diagnoses, layoffs, the year that changed everything. They mean it as permission to grieve. That person is gone. Let them go. But that is not what the philosopher credited with the line actually said. His real words are stranger and more useful, and they change which rung on this list turns out to be the real trap. I'll come back to his exact sentence in a few minutes. The order matters first. Skipping ahead won't work the same way. The same way you can't understand rung 6 without feeling the weight of the first 5. His name is Heraclitus. Where he shows up in this video matters, because the ranking that follows is his ordering, not mine. I am reporting an argument someone else made, not inventing a list of tips. If this is landing somewhere true already, subscribe before you go further. I'd rather you were here for the whole ranking than only for the ending. One more thing before the first rung. This is not a video about grief in general, and it is not about any one kind of loss. It works the same whether the year that changed you was a breakup, a diagnosis, a layoff, a move, or something quieter that never got a name. The mechanism is identical in all of them, only the water is different. 6 things people do while waiting to feel like themselves again. Cheapest first. The first one is coming next, and it barely looks like a mistake at all. Concede this before anything else. Waiting is not a stupid instinct. Plenty of things heal on a clock you don't control. A bruise fades on its own. A bad week loosens its grip by Friday without you doing anything clever about it. You have real evidence from your own life that time alone sometimes does the whole job. So when the breakup, the diagnosis, the layoff, or the year that rearranged you leaves you feeling like a stranger in your own routine, reaching for the same fix isn't irrational. Wait, give it time. It's the correct response to 100 smaller injuries. You're just applying it for the first time to one that isn't smaller. That's the first of 6 rungs. Sit somewhere and let the feeling pass. Assume the old sense of yourself is still in there, buried, surfacing again once enough days go by. The actual cost is this, and it's the cheapest number on the whole ranking, which is exactly why it sits first. It cost you months of low-grade nothing. Nothing gets worse while you wait, but nothing gets built either. You've quietly outsourced your own recovery to a calendar, instead of doing anything with the days sitting on it. Notice why this doesn't work the way the bruise does. Because it's the hinge the rest of this ranking turns on. A bruise heals because your body is doing something specific. Cells doing real repair work, while you do nothing at all. Psychologists who study identity after a major disruption call this self-continuity, the felt sense that today's you is connected to yesterday's you. It gets actively built, or actively lost, depending on what you do with the time. It is not supplied for free by the calendar. No background process is quietly restoring who you were. The days pass, unless something in them actually changes. You arrive at day 90 exactly as far from yourself as day 1, only 90 days further from the event that started this. Some people call this stalled grief, or a delayed reaction, as if the problem is timing. It usually isn't timing. Researchers who study identity after loss describe 2 broad paths people take. One is stalled integration, where the break in the story never gets metabolized, and the person stays at arm's length from their own life. The other is active revision, where the story gets rewritten to include what happened, instead of waiting for the interruption to end. Rung 1 is a slow, comfortable slide toward the first path, dressed up as patience. That's the whole cost of Rung 1, time, spent on the assumption that time was the active ingredient. It's forgivable on its own. Nearly everyone starts here. What comes next is the moment people notice it isn't working and reach for something with more effort in it. That's Rung 2, and it's coming next. The same coffee, made the same way. A kitchen that is not quite the old kitchen. The same running route, even though the new street puts a hill where a straight road used to be. The same playlist, start to finish, in order, like a combination that used to open something. That's Rung 2 of 6, doing the old routine on purpose. Exactly. Hoping the feeling clicks back into place, the way it did for those 4 minutes with the photograph. And it works, sometimes, for about as long as the photograph did. That's not a coincidence. It's the same mechanism, run on purpose this time instead of by accident. Notice why this costs more than Rung 1. Even though it looks like more effort spent in the right direction, effort is not free. Every evening spent recreating the old sequence is an evening not spent building anything new. Rung 1 wasted time passively. This one spends it actively, on a method that cannot work by its own mechanics. Pay attention to the mechanics here, because this mistake is easy to keep making without noticing it. The old routine was never upstream of who you were. It was downstream. You made the coffee that way, ran that route, played those songs in that order, because of who you already were. The routine was an effect, not a cause of anything. Reversing the arrow and hoping the effect will manufacture the cause is choreography. It looks exactly like the thing it's imitating. It produces none of what the original produced, because the original was never really about the coffee. You already know this, somewhere. You finished the ritual on a morning when every motion landed exactly right, and still felt like someone doing an impression of a person who used to live in this apartment. Think about the last time that happened. The mug was right, the light was right, and underneath it, something was clearly missing, the way a photograph of a meal doesn't feed anyone. You noticed the gap, filed it under trying harder, and did the whole routine again the next morning anyway, on the theory that repetition would eventually wear a groove deep enough for the feeling to fall into. That flatness is data, not failure. It's telling you the mechanism was never in the objects. There's a version of this rung that looks like progress from the outside. Friends notice you're doing things again. You post the run, the coffee, the playlist screenshot, and the likes read as evidence you're on track. Nobody in that audience can see the gap between the choreography and the thing it's standing in for. Because the choreography is genuinely well executed, you're the only one who can feel that the room is warm and the food is cold. Watch what happens when people go looking for the missing piece next. Rung 3 is quieter than this one, and it runs for a great deal longer. How many choices this month did you run through a version of yourself that no longer has to live with the outcome? Some of those choices are dramatic. Wide eye, whether to go to the thing you were invited to, whether to say the honest sentence or the easy one, whether to spend Saturday the way you want to now or the way you used to. Somewhere in the half second before you answer, a quieter question runs first. What would the old me have done here? That's Rung 3 of 6. And it's where the cost stops being occasional and starts being constant, because this one runs in the background of every decision, not only the ones you consciously flag as identity questions. Notice who wins that internal hearing every single time and why. The old you never has to live with today's choice. Well, no consequences, no follow-through, no Tuesday morning fallout to answer for. You were litigating your actual life against a defendant who was never going to be cross-examined. Of course, they keep winning. You are both the judge and the person losing every case in front of it. This costs more than Rung 2, and not just differently. The routine at least announced its own failure. You could feel the flatness. This rung is quieter than that. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels like integrity, like staying true to who you really are, which is exactly why people run it for years without noticing the cost. What it actually is, a standing veto, held by someone who isn't in the room, exercised on every decision that person will never answer for. You are not being loyal to yourself. You are being governed by an earlier version of yourself, who never has to live with how any of this turns out. Picture the actual mechanics of one ordinary evening. A friend invites you somewhere, the old you would have loved. You feel the pull toward yes. Then the audit runs, fast, almost too fast to notice. Would that version of me have gone, looking the way I look now, feeling the way I feel now? The verdict comes back uncertain, which in this court always defaults to no. You decline, politely, and call it self-knowledge. Keep that in mind, because it explains something else about this rung that is easy to miss. It is invisible from the inside, precisely because it feels like the opposite of a mistake. Nobody congratulates themselves for waiting, and nobody feels good about the empty ritual by the third repetition. But this one runs quietly, feels like virtue, and rarely gets questioned by the person running it. That is what makes it more expensive than it looks, not less. But it is not the most expensive item on the list of quiet ones. Hold that thought for a moment, because the next rung takes this exact mechanism and starts spending something that does not come back. That veto has been running quietly enough that you may not have called it a veto until this sentence named it. It is about to start costing something you cannot get back. That is a different category of cost than anything so far, and it comes next. Somewhere in the last few months, you said no to something. It had nothing to do with what you were capable of. It had everything to do with the story you were still following, without meaning to. An invitation, conversation that could have gone somewhere, a version of the work or the friendship or the Saturday that the old you supposedly wouldn't have chosen. Never mind that the old you isn't the one who would have had to live inside that choice. That's rung 4 of 6, and it's the first one where the cost stops being your own private time. It's measured in something you cannot buy back at any price. The audit in the last chapter was internal, a private hearing nobody else ever attends. This one has a witness. The person on the other side of the doorway doesn't know they were weighed against a hypothetical and found less compatible with it than the life you used to have. They just experience a door closing at a normal speed for a reason they'll never be told. You weren't entirely sure of the reason yourself until you heard it named just now. Rung 1 cost months. Rung 2 cost evenings spent on a method that couldn't work. Rung 3 costs a constant, quiet erosion of your own judgment. This one costs something. None of the first 3 do. A specific person or a specific chance that will not reappear in identical form. You can eventually stop waiting. You can eventually retire the ritual. You can eventually catch the audit and throw the case out. You cannot go back and take the invitation that already closed. This is the rung where protecting who you used to be stops being a private cost. It starts generating collateral damage in someone else's life, without their knowledge or consent, on the authority of a version of you that technically doesn't exist anymore. Multiply 1 closed door by a year of them, and you start to see why this rung is where people quietly become harder to reach, without ever deciding to be. So the pattern by now should be visible. Each rung does not replace the one before it. It sits on top of it. You are usually running 2 or 3 of these at once, and the audit from the last chapter is what selects which opportunities even reach the point of being refused here. In a moment, I will show you exactly where that compounding stops looking like caution and starts looking like something else entirely. Exactly 1 rung sits above refusing a single opportunity because it doesn't fit the old story, and it is refusing all of them indefinitely. That's rung 5, and it comes next, where the ranking turns genuinely dangerous, and where the philosopher everyone quotes on rivers finally earns his place in the story he supposedly started, not even once. That's the sentence a student of Heraclitus is credited with adding to the river line, according to Aristotle. Slow down here for a moment, because it describes rung 5 exactly. This is the one most people never recognize while they're living inside it. Heraclitus's actual claim, his real words, not the tidy version everyone quotes, which is Plato's paraphrase, written some 80 years after Heraclitus died, is that you cannot step into the same river twice because different water keeps arriving. A student of his, named Heraclitus, took that 1 step further. If the water is always different, Heraclitus argued, then you cannot even step into it once. By the time your foot lands, both the river and the person stepping into it have already changed into something else. Nothing can be named. Nothing holds still long enough to be trusted at all. Ancient sources say Heraclitus eventually stopped speaking in complete sentences and only pointed at things, on the theory that naming anything was already a lie about how long it would stay the same. Imagine believing your own diagnosis so thoroughly you stop being able to answer a simple question, because answering would mean pretending something held still long enough to describe. That's not a clever paradox to admire. It's a description of paralysis, and it's rung 5, translated out of ancient Greek and into your actual week, refusing to commit to any version of yourself. A decision, a move, a relationship, a next step, because none of them feel like the real you yet, and the real you is still, supposedly, on its way back. The first 4 rungs cost months, evenings, judgment, and a handful of missed people or chances. This one costs years, and it has no natural stopping point. The thing being waited for was never going to arrive unchanged. Waiting for it is waiting for something that was never coming in the shape you're picturing. Think about what a year of this actually looks like from outside. Boxes half unpacked, because unpacking them would mean deciding this is really your life now. A relationship left undefined, because naming it would mean it's real. And real things can be wrong. A job kept out of caution rather than choice, because choosing anything counts as betting on a self you're not sure exists yet. None of it looks like crisis. It looks like someone being careful. Every rung below this one at least leaves you doing something, even the wrong something. This rung leaves you doing nothing at all, on the theory that doing nothing is the responsible move until certainty shows up. Certainty was never going to show up. That was true beside a Greek river 2,500 years ago. It is true in your kitchen this week. Exactly one rung remains, and it does not look like paralysis at all. It looks like the opposite of paralysis. That's precisely why almost nobody flags it, including the person doing it, and possibly including you. It comes next. You might already be building the objection to this one. Take it seriously before the answer arrives, because it's a fair objection. Isn't managing what you show people just being a functioning adult? Nobody walks into work and narrates their unresolved grief at the front desk. Some performance is just manners, and manners are not the crime being described here. That's true. It is not what rung 6 is. Rung 6 is not choosing what to show people. It is training yourself over months to punish any sign of the new water showing up at all. Treating a genuine new interest, a new way of laughing, a new opinion, as a betrayal of the old self you're still performing. Suppressing it before anyone, including you, gets to see it happen. This is not managing the presentation. It is editing the actual river underneath it. This rung outranks even the paralysis in the last chapter, which looked like the worst thing on this list, and is not. Paralysis is at least honest about what it is. A person visibly stuck, still present, still recoverable the moment they decide to move. This rung is not stuck. It is moving, fluently and convincingly, in exactly one direction, further into a performance of a person who no longer exists, delivered so consistently that eventually the performer loses the ability to locate the seam between the act and themselves. Watch how it actually plays out over a year or two. Someone laughs at something, the old, you would have rolled your eyes at. You catch it, mid-laugh, and stop. Not because anyone noticed, because you noticed. And the old rules say that laugh doesn't belong to you. Do that enough times, at enough small moments, and eventually there's nothing left to catch. The sensor gets so good, it stops needing to check. Every rung before this one is recoverable the day you notice it. You can stop waiting. You can retire the ritual. You can catch the audit mid-verdict and throw out the case. You can walk back through a door that is still open a crack. Even the paralysis in the last chapter ends the moment you make one real decision and let it stand. This rung does not end the same way. It is not withholding a decision. It is training the part of you that would notice new water arriving to stop reporting it at all. Not even once was a man arguing himself into silence. This rung is the same trap from the opposite direction. Instead of refusing to name anything, you keep naming the same thing, on purpose, long after it stopped being true, until you can no longer tell the difference between the name and the person underneath it. That's the full ranking of 6. Worst last. Doing nothing, doing the wrong thing on purpose, being governed by a hypothetical, losing something you cannot replace, full paralysis. And finally, the one that erases the very thing all 5 of the others were trying to protect. The actual argument, correctly read, points to something other than all 6 of these. That's coming next, and it's the last thing left. Here is the sentence. Finally, not the one on the poster. Different water keeps arriving. That is not what erases the river. It is what the river is made of. A river that stopped receiving new water would not be a preserved version of itself, held safely unchanged. It would be a pond within a season, a dry bed within a year. The thing that looks like the threat, the new water, the new self, the version of you that showed up after the year that changed everything, is the only reason there is still a river to talk about at all. His own student took that same observation and ran it the other way, decided nothing could be trusted to hold still long enough to be named, reportedly stopped being able to speak in full sentences about anything. That is not a paradox to admire. It is what happens when everything changes, gets used as a reason to stop engaging with anything, instead of what it actually is. a description of how continuity works in the first place. Every rung on the list you just heard was a different way of trying to keep the old water. Paying for it, fleeing it, insulting it. He, protecting it, freezing everything until it returns, or performing it so completely you forget you're the one still doing the performing. Every rung made the same mistake in a different costume. None were really about getting the old you back. They were all underneath refusals of the new water, on the theory that refusing it protects the river. It never did. It was the one thing that was ever going to end it. You are not going to feel like the old version of yourself again. And it's worth being precise about why. Because it is not. Because something was stolen from you. It's because that version of the river only ever existed with that water in it. And this water is what's here now. That is not a loss to manage. It is the only way a river keeps being a river at all. By being made of what has arrived since, rather than by what already passed through. The researchers who study this after real losses have a name for the difference between the path that stays stuck and the one that doesn't. They call the second one transformative adaptation, not because the person feels transformed on any given Tuesday, but because the story itself gets rewritten to include what happened, instead of being paused until the interruption ends. Nobody arrives at that by waiting for a mood. They arrive at it by letting one true thing about the present count on purpose, and then another, until the story has enough new material in it to be a story again instead of a pause. So tonight, do not go looking for the photograph. Notice once, one specific thing that has actually arrived since the water changed, small enough to name honestly. Let it count as part of you, instead of putting it on trial in front of someone who is no longer here to decide the verdict. If you recognize the rung you're standing on somewhere in that list, say which one in the comments. I read every one. It's the reason these keep getting made. 1 year from now, someone will find a photo of you from this year, the way you found the one that started this video, for a few minutes. It will do to them exactly what your photo did to you tonight. Let them have it. Let it be a real minute, not a verdict on everything that came after it, and not a reason to go looking for the next one immediately. The river was never waiting to become what it used to be. It was already becoming what it is now, the entire time, the same way it always had.